At Bravo Ridge Air Base, the day had begun like any other. Recruits shouting cadence, Humvees grinding over gravel, and MPs pacing their routine patrols with the usual swagger of men who believed they understood every inch of the installation. But everything changed when they noticed an elderly janitor quietly sweeping near the restricted hangar entrance, dressed in his faded red work shirt, worn blue jeans, and battered boots that had seen decades of life. His white beard framed a face lined with deep experience, but his posture was humble, almost invisible, just another old man pushing a broom where high-ranking officers and elite personnel walked. At least that's what everyone believed, until one MP decided he didn't like the way the old man was standing too close to the restricted zone. The young corporal strutted forward, smirking, tapping his baton against his palm with unnecessary theatrics as two other MPs joined behind him. "Hey, old-timer," the corporal barked, "you lost, or did you decide today's the day you wander into places you should?" The old janitor didn't react. He simply kept sweeping, calm and steady, as though the insults floated past him like dust in the air. His quietness annoyed them more than any argument could have. One MP stepped closer and kicked at the broom bristles, scattering the dirt the old man had just collected. "Did you hear the corporal?" he demanded. "This is a restricted area. You can't just stroll around like you own the place." At that, for the first time, the janitor lifted his eyes, not angry, not frightened, just tired. "I've worked this hangar since before any of you enlisted," he said gently. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The MPs laughed. One snorted, "Sure you have, Grandpa, maybe back when we flew biplanes." Another nudged him mockingly. "Maybe he's one of those old guys who makes up war stories to feel important." "You got ID?" the corporal demanded, stepping closer until his nose was inches away. "Or do we escort you off base right now?" The old man reached slowly for the badge clipped to his shirt, but before he could unfasten it, the corporal slapped his hand away. "Don't even bother, you're coming with us." With practiced aggression, the MPs grabbed the janitor by the arms, not enough to injure him, but enough to humiliate him. Soldiers and airmen nearby paused their tasks, watching awkwardly but saying nothing. After all, who steps in to defend a janitor? The MPs began pulling him away from the hangar, their voices mocking, disrespectful, and loud enough to draw a crowd. But the old man did not resist. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He simply looked down at the ground, sweeping one last glance toward the hangar as though it held something far deeper than anyone else realized. And that's when everything changed. A distant engine hum died suddenly. Footsteps, heavy, commanding, unmistakably authoritative, approached from the far side of the tarmac. Conversation stopped. Even the MPs hesitated as every head turned toward the figure marching toward them with a presence that bent the air. The base commander himself, full uniform, chest lined with decades of ribbons, voice known across the installation, strode directly toward the commotion. His face, usually stern and unreadable, shifted the moment he recognized who the MPs were holding. His eyes widened, his pace quickened. And then, with a sharpness that cracked across the hangar like a rifle shot, he shouted words none of the MPs ever expected to hear. "Nobody touches him, do you hear me? Nobody touches him." The MPs froze mid-motion. The old man slowly lifted his gaze. The entire base seemed to hold its breath. "Keep listening, and which city are you listening from? And if you enjoy the story, please subscribe for more." The air around the restricted hangar thickened as the base commander closed the distance, his boots striking the pavement with the heavy cadence of a man whose authority was rarely questioned. The MPs who just seconds ago had been dragging the old janitor away now stood stiff, pale, and visibly shaken. None of them had expected the commander to intervene, let alone with such force. The old man, still held loosely by the arms, stared down at the ground with that same quiet patience, as if this entire confrontation was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. But beneath the surface, the stakes of the moment were rising higher than any of the young MPs could comprehend. The commander stopped right in front of them, his jaw tight, eyes burning with a mix of disbelief and fury. "Unhand him," he said, voice low, steady, dangerous. The MPs released the old man instantly, stepping back like they had touched fire. One tried to snap into a respectful stance, but his hand trembled too hard to hold the posture. The commander didn't look at them. His gaze was locked on the old janitor, scanning him head to toe with something that resembled concern. "Sir, are you hurt?" he asked softly. And that single word, "sir," hit the crowd like a shockwave. The spectators who had gathered began whispering to each other. Why was the base commander speaking to a janitor with that tone? Why was he addressing him as if he outranked everyone present? And most importantly, what did this old man mean to him? The corporal swallowed hard, his throat clicking. He stepped forward, trying to salvage control of a situation that was rapidly escaping him. "Sir, Commander, this man was loitering too close to a restricted hangar. We were removing him for security reasons." He tried to sound confident, but his voice wavered. The commander finally turned to face him, and the expression he wore made every recruit within earshot shrink internally. "Security reasons," the commander repeated slowly, as though the words tasted foul. "You thought he was a security risk." The corporal nodded weakly, but the commander didn't give him time to defend himself. He stepped closer, so close the corporal felt the man's breath on his face. "Son, do you have any idea who you just put your hands on?" the corporal faltered. "Yes, sir. He's a janitor, a civilian. He, the commander cut in sharply, pointing at the old man, had higher clearance than you, me, or any officer on this base when you were still learning to tie your boots." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the janitor himself seemed uncomfortable with that revelation, shifting slightly as though he disliked the attention. The commander continued, his voice rising. "And if this man wanted access to this hangar, he wouldn't need a badge. He built half the protocols that you just cited." The corporal's face drained of color. One of the younger MPs whispered, "Built protocols?" The commander nodded, his jaw clenching. "Yes, this base stands because of him. Our security measures, our tactical response systems, the very emergency procedures you memorized at training, they come from him. And you laid hands on him like he was trespassing outside a shopping mall." The shame washed over the MPs in a crushing wave. The old man finally lifted his head, his eyes softening. "Commander," he said gently, "they were just doing their job. Let's not make a scene." But the commander shook his head firmly. "No, sir. The scene was made the moment they forgot what respect looks like." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the truth became undeniable. The old janitor was no ordinary man. He was someone whose presence carried weight, someone whose past held stakes far deeper than anyone realized. And now the entire base was about to learn just how much they owed him. The tension around the restricted hangar thickened until it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The young MPs stood frozen, their earlier arrogance evaporated, replaced with a gnawing dread that twisted in their stomachs. The base commander, still positioned protectively near the old janitor, wasn't done speaking, and everyone knew it. But nobody expected how fast the situation was about to escalate, or just how deep the old man's past truly went. As more personnel drifted toward the commotion, pilots in flight suits, engineers with toolkits, even a few officers jogging over, the whispers spread like wildfire. The janitor, the commander intervening, the salute-like tone in his voice. Something wasn't right. Something didn't add up. And then the moment that changed everything happened. A call came over the base-wide loudspeaker, crackling urgently. "Attention, all units. Emergency systems check triggered in Hangar 3. Repeat, unauthorized system activation detected. Security teams respond." Hangar 3, the same hangar the janitor had been sweeping near. Suddenly, every eye turned toward him, not accusingly, but with a growing, uneasy realization. The commander didn't look surprised at all. Instead, he exhaled sharply, almost bitterly. "Of course it activated," he muttered. "It always reacts when he's near." The MPs stared at him confused. "Sir, how would he set off emergency systems just by standing there?" The commander didn't answer. Instead, he tapped his radio. "Ops, cancel all teams. This is not a breach. Repeat, cancel all teams. I'll handle this personally." A stunned silence followed his order. To override a hangar alarm alone was unheard of. The old janitor sighed, rubbing the back of his neck with embarrassment. "I told you to deactivate my old access years ago," he murmured. "It still triggers recognition protocols." Recognition protocols. The recruits blinked in disbelief. The commander turned sharply to the MPs, frustration sharpened by reverence. "That hangar system was programmed decades ago to respond to only 4 individuals. 3 are buried, and this," he gestured to the old man with both hands, voice cracking. "This is the 4th. Murmurs erupted through the crowd, shock, disbelief, even fear, but the commander wasn't finished. He took a step closer to the old janitor, his expression softening into something almost reverent. "Sir, are you willing to tell them who you were? They need to hear it from you, not from me." The janitor looked uncomfortable, truly uncomfortable, even more than when the MPs had grabbed him. He glanced at the crowd, now swelling into dozens of personnel, all waiting, watching, holding on to every breath. And then he shook his head. "No," he said quietly, "I'm nobody now, just let me do my work." But the commander refused to accept that. "Sir, with respect, these young men put their hands on someone whose legacy kept this base alive. They need to understand the gravity of their mistake." The recruits shifted uneasily, dread rising with every word. The corporal bit his lip, sensing something immense looming in the air. "Yes, sir," he stammered. Who exactly is he?" The commander inhaled slowly, as though preparing to lift something heavy. And then, with the voice of a man revealing a myth to the living, he said, "He's the former chief of strategic operations, the architect of our Cold War response units, the man who led the silent perimeter missions, the man whose classified achievements I'm not even allowed to describe in detail." The only operative whose file is still sealed at the presidential level. Gasps swept the crowd like a shockwave. The old janitor looked down, embarrassed, almost ashamed of the attention. "Those days are long gone," he said softly. "I'm just here to keep the place clean." But nobody believed that anymore. Not after the alarm, not after the commander's reaction, not after learning the truth. And then came the final twist, the one that pulled the entire base deeper into awe. A black SUV screeched onto the tarmac. The doors flew open. Out stepped a man every soldier recognized instantly, a decorated three-star general. And the moment he spotted the janitor, his face changed, shocked, then relieved, then deeply respectful. He walked forward quickly and spoke words that made the entire crowd straighten involuntarily. "Is that truly you, sir? We thought you were gone." The recruits' jaws dropped. The MP's knees nearly buckled. And the legend they had manhandled just stood there, sweeping gently at the dust beneath his boots. A heavy hush swept across the training field as the three-star general approached, his uniform catching the late afternoon sun in a way that made every soldier instinctively stiffen. But his eyes weren't on the base commander, nor on the MPs, nor the dozens of personnel now gathered in a widening horseshoe of shocked silence. His eyes were fixed, almost disbelievingly, on the old janitor standing with his broom resting lightly in his hand. The general stopped just a foot away, the weight of decades settling in his expression, and then, before anyone could process what they were seeing, he brought his hand sharply up into a salute. A full, crisp, immaculate salute delivered to a man in scuffed boots and faded coveralls. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a physical force. Some soldiers flinched, others straightened, but everyone felt the same invisible gravity pull them tighter into the moment. The janitor closed his eyes briefly, as if the gesture burdened him more than honored him, then gave a small nod instead of returning the salute, an even stronger statement in the eyes of anyone who understood protocol. A nod meant equals. A nod meant old friends. A nod meant shared ghosts. The general lowered his hand slowly, his voice barely stable as he spoke. "Sir, your file was marked inactive 22 years ago. We thought—" He stopped, swallowing thickly. "We thought you had been lost during the final perimeter sweep." The young MPs felt their blood run cold. The base commander looked down, suddenly humbled all over again. The janitor, now undeniably someone far more than any of them had imagined, shifted slightly, as though uncomfortable under the heavy weight of so many stares. "I wasn't lost," he said quietly, "just tired and done with all the noise." His broom tapped gently against the concrete, a strangely grounding sound in the middle of the emotional storm. "I figured sweeping floors would quiet things down," but the general shook his head. "You don't get to just disappear, not after everything you did, not after everything you carried, not after what you built." He turned so the entire crowd could hear him. "Do any of you know what this man's real title was, what he actually commanded?" His gaze swept over the recruits, the same young men who had shoved the old janitor just minutes earlier. Their faces were pale now, their shoulders trembling under the pressure of a truth they hadn't yet learned. The general didn't wait. "This man," he said, voice rising with a mixture of awe and fury, "was the officer who created our silent perimeter doctrine, the strategy that prevented multiple incursions during the Cold War. The man whose field decisions saved thousands of American lives. The man whose classified operations are still used as training benchmarks at senior war colleges." Soldiers exchanged shocked glances. Even senior officers looked shaken. The general wasn't done. He was the mission lead for Operation Iron Sweep. The mission historians tried to reconstruct, but never could because the entire command team refused to disclose the operative's name. "That operative," he said, turning fully back to the janitor, "was you." A wave of stunned disbelief rippled so strongly through the crowd that the MPs nearly staggered. The corporal who had grabbed the janitor earlier bit his lips so hard it almost bled. The janitor, however, looked almost pained at hearing his past spoken aloud. "That was someone else," he murmured. "A younger man, someone who made choices I still don't sleep easy with." The general's response was sharp. "Those choices kept this nation breathing." Then, in a sudden gesture that electrified the entire field, the general turned toward the base commander. "Why is he holding a broom?" he demanded. The commander straightened. "Sir, he requested quiet work." "Requested?" the general scoffed, incredulous. "A man like him deserves a seat at the head table, not a mop bucket." Before anyone could respond, the alarm from Hangar 3 abruptly shut off, a delayed acknowledgement from the system recognizing that the man it had detected was not a threat, but the original architect of its protocols. The timing was eerie, almost poetic. The old janitor sighed. "See, even the machines remember too much." And then something extraordinary happened, something no one on that base would forget for the rest of their careers. Every soldier in the crowd, from privates to seasoned officers, straightened, faced the old man, and without waiting for orders, every single one of them raised their hand in a silent, unified salute. It was raw, unscripted, reverent. The janitor looked out at the sea of rigid hands, at the faces filled with admiration, regret, and awe, and for the first time in years his eyes softened with something warmer than sorrow: respect. Real respect. The kind he never asked for, but had earned long before any of them were born. When the last salute finally lowered, the air around the training field seemed to shift, lighter, clearer, as if the entire base had exhaled at once. The old janitor, once dismissed, shoved, and mocked only minutes before, stood quietly with his broom tucked under one arm, staring at the ground as if unsure what to do with the sudden weight of reverence surrounding him. The general stepped forward again, his voice softened now, reshaped by humility and something far deeper. "Sir, please," he said quietly, "come back with us. Let us honor you properly. Let us acknowledge what you built." But the old man shook his head gently. A small, tired smile appeared, one that spoke of peace found not in medals or ceremonies, but in silence, routine, and the comfort of being unseen. "I didn't build it alone," he murmured. "And the ones who helped me. Most of them didn't get years like these, didn't get time to sweep floors and breathe easy. So no, I'll stay right here. Quiet suits me." The general's eyes tightened with emotion, but he nodded respectfully. "If quiet is what you want, then we won't disturb it, but the base will not forget who you are. Not again." He turned to the base commander, who stood at trembling attention. "As of this moment, this man is granted unrestricted honorary access to all non-classified facilities. He is not to be removed, questioned, or touched by anyone on this installation." The commander swallowed hard and saluted immediately. "Yes, sir." Then the general added louder for every witness to hear, "And any disrespect toward him will be treated as conduct unbecoming." A collective pulse of understanding ran through the field. The message was clear. What happened today would never happen again. For the first time, the young MPs stepped forward, not to restrain, but to apologize. Their voices quavered, the earlier bravado and arrogance replaced by genuine remorse. "Sir, we didn't know," one whispered, unable to meet his eyes. We thought you shouldn't be here." The old man studied them for a long, heavy moment, not judging, not furious, just quietly evaluating the sincerity in their posture and voices. Then he rested a hand on the corporal's shoulder, the same one who had tried to push him off the field. "You were doing your job," he said. "Just remember there's more to a man than what you see. Always more." The corporal nodded rapidly, relief flooding his expression. Around them, the gathered soldiers began to disperse slowly, murmuring among themselves. Word of what had happened would ripple through every barracks, every hangar, every office on the base before nightfall. The story would become legend, a cautionary tale, a reminder of humility, a testament to unseen heroes walking quietly among them. The general lingered a moment longer, looking at the janitor with something like reverence. "If you ever want to come back," he said softly, "to teach, to advise, even just to sit in on training, we would be honored to have you." The old man gave a quiet laugh. "Careful what you wish for. I might correct every bad habit in your whole chain of command." The general laughed too, shaking his head. "We could use it." Finally, the janitor lifted his broom and resumed sweeping the concrete, each stroke steady and unhurried. The general and commander watched him go not as a janitor, but as a legend choosing the simplest path. A path he had earned the right to walk. As the sun dipped behind the hangars, 3 young MPs remained standing, staring after him. One finally muttered, "How many more heroes like him do you think we pass every day without knowing?" The senior MP exhaled slowly. "All of them," he said. "That's why we show respect to everyone." And somewhere near the center of the field, an old man swept in silence, at peace, unseen only by choice, carrying a history the base would never ignore again. If you enjoyed this story of humility, hidden valor, and a legend walking in plain sight, don't forget to subscribe for more stories honoring the heroes among us.